welcome to Spotlight in Bensenville. My name is Frank DeSimone, Village President and your host for this episode. Today we'll be discussing the Bensonville Community and Economic Development Department with guests Evan Summers, Village Manager, and Curtis Posgay, Director of Community and Economic Development. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Jump right in. So today we're going to focus on the economic development portion of the Community and Economic Development Department. So I would like to start by welcoming our new Director of Community and Economic Development, Curtis. So Curtis, tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to this career.
Yeah, thanks, President DeSimone. As you said, I newly appointed Director of Community Economic Development. Been here, actually, as of today, the day we're filming is my 6-year anniversary. It's my hire date. The previous 5 years, I've been the senior planner with the village. I've been basically I was managing Community Development Commission, business licensing, and then really helping out with our economic development efforts. So I've been around for a while, stepping right in to the director position, knowing full well what we're about as the village and where we're trying to go. Personally, I've got an urban and regional planning degree from Michigan State University. I've been in the planning field for roughly 17 years or so. I've actually got, along with our village manager, we both got certificates in municipal finance from the University of Chicago, and I'm about a year out actually from completing my master's in community and economic development from Penn State. So it's just something I'm passionate about and been involved in for a long time now.
One of the reasons I sought Curtis out for this job is Curtis has a unique skill set of his background's planning, and sometimes planners drive me nuts because they make plans and they put in nice big binders and put them on the shelf. Curtis has a proven history of taking those plans off the shelf and putting them into motion. He also has a really good understanding for public finance and how we can use public finance to help stimulate economic growth in the community.
So what is the role of the municipality in economic development? Does the municipality help businesses with their site selection? How does that work?
Yeah, the municipality can play a bunch of roles. Here in Bensonville, I think there's a couple strategies that we really focus on. The first strategy is really just making it easy to do business. Part of that means kind of getting out of the way a little bit. We want our processes and, we want everything really clear and easy to understand. We want you to be able to, look at our code, know exactly what you can do with your property, and be confident that when you come in for a permit that there aren't any hiccups. Now, that being said, we're here to help. So that's kind of the next strategy, right, is we're going to assist you in whatever way possible. So, if there's any questions about what you're trying to do with your property, feel free to give us a ring. We're going to walk you through it, and tell you exactly how to get where you want to go.
I build this, I call it boutique economic development, where we deliver such personalized service to every business owner that comes to us or is in town, where they will have a point of contact within our village hall that they know that person, they know them by first name, we know them by first name, and we can walk them through any challenge that they may have. We don't see that a lot in a lot of towns around us. I always joke that Cook County is our #1 economic developer. We get a lot of businesses fleeing Cook County because of the overregulation over there. They come over here to Bensonville. We roll out the red carpet for businesses. We're here from site selection all the way through ribbon cutting and everything in between.
So why do we need to strengthen the local economic development?
Economic development benefits the whole community. When we get a new business or a new development, that's good for our tax base, and that really takes the pressure off the residents, right? It takes the pressure off the existing, residential taxpayers. So that lowers the burden on everybody else. And so we're always trying to get better, especially on the business side, because residents come first. But we are here to help the businesses and figure out a way to make it easy for them to survive. We're a partnership in this. If you do well, we do well. Similarly, even let's say we're getting new residential developments. It's the same thing. New developments are good for the tax base and reduce taxes for the rest of us, right? So really just trying to ensure that we have good, strong tax base moving forward.
And it kind of is, economic development is a cornerstone of your administration. And I can speak a little bit to the finance side of that, is you've made it very clear to me that we try to target between only a 1% to 2% property tax growth annually. And we've been doing that. We have a long track record of doing that. I think everyone knows everything's getting more expensive very, very quickly. You just look at employee wages, and those are moving at about 3 to 5% every year. So you just think about that. If we're going 1 to 2% on property tax increase and 3 to 5% on salaries, the only way for us to keep the village afloat without raising property taxes is grow that tax base. And by that rising tide raising all boats, that allows us to have the money to do important things like public works projects and have police officers out on the street.
So what are the village's key goals in growing business in Bensenville?
Yeah, right now it's really about managing the incredible interest in the O'Hare market. Our industrial sector is still, even recently with something like the slight downturn or signals that things could be happening in the economy. Our industrial district is thriving, and a lot of that is because what happened at O'Hare. We're all aware of what happened with the village because of O'Hare's expansion. Now that all that has settled, the village's existing properties, the existing industrial base is very attractive to the industrial user. So we've seen a lot of redevelopment in the last couple of years. In 2021 alone, we developed more square footage than any other DuPage County community. We are at the forefront of industrial development at the county level, and really to an extent nationally. I mean, O'Hare Airport is one of the top commercial airports in the world, and we are at its doorstep. So we really try to take advantage of that, and it's really just kind of managing that process, a little bit of what I said before about trying to get out of the way and allowing some of these developments to happen, but also allowing them to happen and not affect our residents or not adversely affect other businesses. So it's really about sort of managing that whole process. Some other things, we'd really like to see the downtown develop more. We've been working really hard the past couple of years. We did a new streetscape that was basically developed in 2018. The village owns a couple key parcels down here that we'd really like to see developed, particularly that 101 main site, which we just think is an excellent opportunity for somebody. And we're positive that's gonna pay off at some point here in the near future. We just had our first new mixed-use commercial residential building developed last year, which is a great step. That means there's interest in the downtown, probably for the first time in a long time. So that's what we're excited about. Finally, our commercial properties. Particularly Irving Park Road. We've had a couple new chains come in, nationally recognized. O'Reilly Auto. We had the Gem Car Wash. So there's interest in Irving Park Road again. So we're seeing redevelopment, and then there's probably 3 key parcels out there right now that are just on the verge of being redeveloped that we have a hand in and that we're really excited about. So keep your eyes open for those.
So let me ask you a question. So say a business owner or a business plan wants to come in and they pick a location and it fits. They're allowed to do it. It fits all the criteria. Can the village say, no, we don't want you there?
No, so we have rules and regulations that they have to follow. So there's a zoning code which would say they're either allowed or not allowed to do what they want to do there. There's also something called a special use, where if it's a special use in the code, they could come through the Community Development Commission and the village board ask special approval to have that use there. But generally, if it's allowed in the code and what they're developing is allowed per code, there's nothing we can do to stop them. Essentially they are allowed. And what we've done in the code is lay out a vision of what we want there. So essentially anybody coming in that is able to look at our code and fit into what we wanted to see there, that's probably a development we want to see anyways. But generally, yeah, there's not much we can do once they fit into what's allowed in the code.
I think it's important too to understand that under state law, and there's even federal law on this, legal businesses have to be able to locate within your town. You just can't say, I'm not going to allow a certain type of business in my town. If it's a legal business that is allowed to exist, they have to have somewhere within your community, and that's what the zoning code is all about. When Curtis talked about it earlier, one of the first things that you did when you came in was overhaul our zoning code. So we made it, one of the big steps was to make it easy to read. Historically, zoning codes use words like haberdasheries, and that's supposed to be a men's clothing shop. Well, instead of saying haberdashery, we say clothing stores, right? Simple as that. So we really simplified it. So if you are a business that wants to know where you can locate, you can just easily open our zoning code and find out where it is. But to your point, if the village would get in a lot of trouble if we just arbitrarily said, we don't like you, you can't come here, you can't locate there.
Another question I have for you. Just on the record, how many hardware stores have we tried to grab for this town?
Everyone who's operated a hardware store in Northern Illinois, I think we've called them. All the big chains from Ace Hardware, True Value, and Do It Best, they know us. They kind of told us, we'll call you. You're calling us way too much.
I mean, for that matter, we've met with several users, and a couple of times, actually, I think we thought we might have had one in hand. So we've gone down the road a few times with some potential hardware store users. It just doesn't always work out. We don't always get what we want. We try really hard, though, and that's been a priority of ours for a few years now.
Yeah, I think it's important. Every hardware store chain that we've met with really likes our area. What we're struggling with is finding the operator to open that store. That's like a franchise model. So you need someone to invest several $1 million, and that person needs to do that, and they can use the name of an Ace Hardware or True Value or Do It Best. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to stop. I think you've made that charge very clear to us. We need to get a hardware store in town. Our residents want a hardware store in town, and we're going to keep working at it.
So Community and Economic Development puts out a development report. I think it's every year. What are some of the highlights of our 2021 report?
Yeah, so I sort of alluded to it earlier, but 2021 was a really big year for us, probably the biggest on at least recent record. Irving Park Road, O'Reilly Auto Parts, Gem Car Wash, downtown was the Omega Pro Systems, new mixed-use development. Hamilton Partners up on 1000 Route 83 redeveloped a 150,000 square foot, Class A industrial building that's already filled. Yahi Technologies relocated from Arlington Heights. That's a 300,000 square foot addition to the village. That was on Foster Avenue. We just knocked it out of the park last year. The Choose DuPage put out their 2021 report, and when we reviewed their data, we were the top community. We had more square footage developed in our industrial districts than any other community. Not only that, we have an even bigger 2022 coming. There are significant projects that are, ground up building right now that are going to be really important to the village and really do good things for our tax base. We also, I think the other big one for us in 2021 was the Think Bensonville campaign. So this is our economic development marketing effort. I put together an economic development strategy a couple years ago, and one of the big keys to that was really marketing the community. Evan and I, our previous employer, did this very well. And so when we came here, we knew this was something that we wanted to tackle as far as economic development goes. And really, it's about just showing, our residents, the business community, those interested in Bensonville, what we're about. So we celebrate our successes, and then we advertise what the potential is here. So we put together this excellent campaign. Everything from a website to you're going to see some commercials out there soon. So really proud of that effort, and we're hoping that to really get the ball rolling here in the years to come with that.
I think it's important, if I could just jump in there, it's important that Think Bensonville isn't just about the big 300,000 square foot warehouse. Our economic development strategy really starts, our square one, our foundation, it's all on a continuum, is preserve the businesses you have. That's what we do every day. We want to make sure the businesses we have are here and thriving, and that's from the mom and pop cutting hair all the way on up to the 300,000 square foot business. And then it's the second aspect of that continuum is grow the businesses you have. There is no greater pat on the back for a municipality than when one of their businesses decides to grow into a bigger space or hire more workers and stay in town. There's a lot of places they could go. They could go out far west where it's a lot cheaper, but they want to stay here because the location matters, the municipality matters, and they matter. And then third, the last thing we do is recruit new business. That's what once we've taken care of these first two things, then we can start tackling the other thing.
So let me get this straight. The Think Bensonville campaign is not just industrial buildings?
No, it's not.
No, yeah, and we'll get on and into this a little bit more here in the next question, I think, too. But Think Bensonville is how we promote economic development. So it's not just industrial. It's it's really about promoting the village in general. But we take this to trade shows. So ICSC is more commercial focused. We go there with a group of communities, but focus on Think Bensonville as our image. It's about getting the name out there, and really the idea is when any business or resident, for that matter, is thinking about a move, we want them to think Bensonville. So that's lower taxes. That's that's great business opportunities. That's think the airport. Think transportation. Think getting downtown easier. You got the great metro line. We've got every freeway access you can imaginable. Right at our doorstep. We are really the hub of sort of economic engine in the Chicagoland. So that's what Think Bensonville means, is really when you're making your decision, we want you to think about our community.
Bensonville spent a long time, I think, with our eye off the ball historically. We spent a lot of time fighting O'Hare, and it was probably a worthwhile fight. It was, but it did take a lot of energy and effort away from looking at our commercial corridors, our retail corridors, as well as our industrial district. And you can kind of see that if you drive through, previously you drive through and see these old 1960s, 70s buildings. And in Bensonville, and our neighbors had these brand new Class A buildings. Think Bensonville's kind of the awakening of the giant of we need to catch back up, and we're going to do that rather quickly. And it's going to be pretty exciting. It's a branding campaign. It's so we are consistent across all of our media platforms when we're talking to the businesses that Bensonville's here, our location cannot be beat, our tax structure cannot be beat.
So how can residents find out a little bit more about our Bensonville economic development?
I always say the easiest way is just give us a call. So that's our number is 630-350-3413. That's the Community and Economic Development Department. We got a great staff here, answer any questions, walk you through any processes, whether that's permitting or site selection or planning. Give us a ring and we'll assist you as best as possible. Our village website, bensonville.il.us, is a great resource. So the Community and Economic Development page, there's a tab basically at the top under government, and you can go through and find all sorts of information on there, including the village code. So if you ever want to go in and find the zoning ordinance, it's located there, planning documents, forms, permitting, any of that kind of stuff. The village website's great. I mentioned it briefly too, but Think Bensonville has its own website, so that's thinkbensonville.com. Again, it's sort of our marketing promotion, information website.
I hope you guys have a couple of minutes. We have to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to come back with some more questions. If you guys can hang around, it'll be great.
Absolutely.
And we will be right back after the short commercial break.
Hi there. I want to take you on a journey through a community powered by SeeClickFix. Here, internal operations are streamlined with more intuitive, secure workflows and communications. Here, let me show you how it all works. SeeClickFix organizes, tracks, and manages service requests from everyday citizens through a single application. When they see a problem, a few clicks is all it takes to send off a service request. From there, the right people get the request and get to work. All communication and task management is seamlessly coordinated through the app. Citizens can see the work being done and even receive a follow-up message when the work is completed. It's a team effort all around, and you have the data you need to make better decisions. Cities large and small use SeeClickFix to accomplish more for their citizens with the staff, time, and budget they've already got. Get started today.
Hello, welcome back to Spotlight in Bensonville. My name is Frank DeSimone, Village President, your host for this episode. Today we are discussing the Bensonville Community and Economic Development Department with our guest Evan Summers, Village Manager, and Curtis Posgay, Director of Community and Economic Development. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Jumping right into it. In the last segment, we spent some time discussing the role of economic development in the municipality. For this segment, I want to focus on zoning planning. So what is the municipal zoning and how is it established?
Yeah, so, tall question, especially for a planner. I probably go on all day about this, but...
Please don't.
Yeah. Municipal zoning is established by ordinance, so that's first off, right? It is a big ordinance in our, book of ordinances here. I mentioned it briefly in the last segment. We actually just went through a pretty extensive process. We had a grant from CMAP, with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, a few years ago, and basically redid our entire zoning ordinance. So our zoning ordinance is, in that sense, kind of cutting edge, where it's sort of new, right? So 2019 was the first year of implementation. So we've had a few years now where we're really kind of in the swing of things with the ordinance. Zoning ordinance, at its most basic level, tells a property owner what they can and can't do with their property. So it's rules and regulations. Our zoning ordinance tries to remove a lot of the fluff. I mean, the old zoning ordinance was basically a thicker document, right? There was a lot of unnecessary stuff in there. The newer one, we've sort of tried to simplify it, make it easier to read, less legalese. But it's fundamentally, someone should be able to go into our zoning ordinance and figure out what they can and can't do with or on their property. And that even goes with businesses. So if a business is coming to town and they want to know if they're allowed to do what they want to do on a certain property, that's in our zoning ordinance.
So if I were to buy a property and it's zoned commercial, could I live in it?
Absolutely not. No, so little caveat there. So our downtown is zoned mixed use. You can live above a commercial property. But commercial properties, by and large, are not allowed to be lived in.
Okay. So how are zoning and planning decisions made?
Yeah, so much of zoning and planning is made, essentially in the code. The code will outline what is allowed and isn't allowed. So if you meet code, you are allowed to do, whatever it is you want to do. The trick there is, if there is some small deviation or something you want to do that's a little different than what's in the code, then we have to go through a special process to get you approved to do what you want to do. And so you would request what we call a variation. So that would be, an application that gets filled out to our Community Development Commission. Community Development Commission is a public body made up of residents in town. They hear, variance requests from the community, and they make decisions, but their recommendation, and that's all it is a recommendation, gets forwarded onto the village board, who then would have to approve an ordinance to allow this to happen. So it's a very public process. There's a required public hearing that has to be made. We have to notify people about this process. Mm-hmm. It's very open. These decisions aren't taken lightly. And it depends, again, what exactly is being asked. Minor variations, are something, they want to go a little higher than what is allowed, or they want to go a little outside of their, required setbacks in their lots. Major stuff is going to be a lot harder to get approved, obviously. Similarly, business licensing, you're not just allowed to open a business wherever. So certain businesses are what we call special use. So if they require a special use, they have to go through that Community Development Commission process. Same thing, case is heard, and then a recommendation is forwarded on the village board.
I think a lot of people, when they hear, you have to go through a variation process, they kind of groan at that, like, why are you punishing me? It's not. I think if we think of a world where there was no variation process, the answer would simply be no. I want to build my house out past the limits. No. Well, the variation process allows reasonable people, and the Community Development Commission is made up of your neighbors. They're unpaid residents. They're not necessarily professionals in this. They're just your neighbors who get to hear these and go, you know what, Curtis does want to extend his garage one more foot than would normally be allowed. That seems reasonable. We'll allow that. So the variation process is actually there to help support our residents and allow for reasonable accommodation to be made.
So what are the different types of zoning requirements in which someone could be requesting relief? Yeah,
I mean, really you can request relief from anything in the code, but we have some that are just sort of regular requests. A big one is corner side yard fencing. And I think people are always a little confused when this one comes up, but the village, the way it's laid out, a lot of it on a grid, which means you have a lot of properties that essentially have two front yards. So they're on a corner lot, they have two streets, they have two front yards. Fences aren't allowed in a front yard, so if they want to put a fence in their backyard, but that's technically a second front yard, mm-hmm. they got to request relief from that. So that's a typical one that gets approved because it's understandable. I mean, it's their rear yard, it's their second, it's their second front yard. Mm-hmm. So within reason, they're allowed to put a fence up for the most part. There's some other ones, special requests for residential areas like driveways, parking pads. We get a lot of this. These ones are a little tougher. We're very hesitant to allow too much parking on a residential lot, but it's a common request, comes before us all the time, especially if we're catching people illegally parking in unapproved surfaces. They'll try to come through and get requests to maybe do a larger parking pad or a larger driveway. Our biggest concern with those types of issues are usually somewhere in the field of water and how much coverage you have on a lot. You're only allowed to cover your lot 50%. So we accommodate as much as possible on those, but we also don't want to blanket, approve parking all over someone's lot, and we don't want to go over that 50% because that causes issues with water for your neighbors or maybe even yourself. I mean, flooding's a major concern in the village. So those are kind of the standard things we see in the residential areas. For commercial, I sort of touched on it. A lot of it's special uses in the commercial districts. Typically it's a business requesting to go in somewhere and it's a special use. That's typically what you're see. But also, especially in these new developments in maybe say the industrial district, they're a lot of times working on either fencing or parking, trailer parking. Truck parking's a big one for us.
Outdoor storage.
And then we have something we call outdoor storage, which is how we regulate the storage of trucks on lots. And that one is always coming up, and that one we regulate pretty heavily. But yeah, so it kind of depends. Drive-throughs are a special use request anywhere in the village. So if commercial needs a drive-through for their business, they always are going to have to come to the Community Development Commission for a request.
I think it's important to just go back to fundamentally what zoning is designed to do. And it's designed so you can do what you need to on your property without negatively impacting your neighbors. So that's why we have lot coverage requirements, because if we cover too much of the lot, then we have flooding issues. And that's why we have parking requirements, because if there's not enough parking on your property, then you start eating up street parking. So it all goes back to trying to protect the value of everyone's property in any given district.
Yeah, and even more so on the commercial side. So we have kind of additional regulations. So let's say a tobacco shop wants to come in, and we have a lot of them in town. So we have special restrictions on these types of uses. So not only are they a special use, but then there's an additional restriction saying they got to be 1,000 foot from a similar use. So you can't just put another tobacco shop in next door to one that's already there. So in certain cases, we have additional regulations to further restrict where and how many of these uses can go.
What is a text amendment?
So a text amendment happens when we want to adjust something in the code. Really, when we redid the entire zoning code, that's just one giant text amendment, right? We just flat out replaced everything. But ever since then, we're 3 years running. We essentially recognize that it's not perfect. We're not perfect going through the first time. We're going to catch things as we're going that we'd like to adjust. So we do text amendments all the time. Where needed. So that could be just minor changes for I think one of the recent ones we were requesting was in the residential areas we had a requirement that you had to screen mechanical equipment in your rear yard. So like an AC unit that was in your yard. It seemed excessive. You don't need to build a brick wall on a residential property. Industrial, that's something different. They got to screen theirs. Why would a resident need to do that? So we took that out. So it just, it's basically a living document. The code isn't set in stone. We're always going to tweak it. We're always going to go back and make adjustments where needed.
Where can I find Bensenville zoning regulations?
Yeah, so we have it linked to on the website, which is going to be your best resource. There is a hosting site called AmLegal that we contract with. So they are the codifiers. They keep track of everything, and then they have a really nice search feature in there, so you can figure out exactly where you're at. It's our zoning code is, I believe, Title 10 in the Code of Ordinances. So if you're ever on the village website, click on Village Ordinances. It'll take you to AmLegal. And on the left-hand side, you can go down to Title 10. But beyond that, I would actually maybe even just suggest calling us again. We have a staff planner who is very versed in all this, knows the ins and outs of that code probably better than anyone. He's the one you're going to want to talk to, and he'll set you straight on what's allowed, what isn't allowed, and if it isn't, how do you go about maybe requesting one of those variances we talked about.
And I mentioned this earlier. Zoning can be pretty dry, unless you're a nerd like Curtis who really gets excited over zoning stuff. I don't think you do, Mayor. But our zoning code was written by planners and not by attorneys. And if you look at a lot of other towns whose her zoning code was written by attorneys. You almost like feel like you need a decoder ring, and that's by design. A lot of towns want you to hire a land use attorney to help navigate that process. That's not what we do here. We really try to give the power back to the people on their zoning, so any resident or any business can look up that zoning code, search for what they're looking for. Our zoning code's full of pictures and tables and charts, and you can figure out your zoning, figure out what's allowed there. And it's really easy to use.
And that's a good point. I just to touch on it real quick. You don't need, we stress this, especially with the residential areas, you do not need an attorney to come to our Community Development Commission. That's a public body. The application that we have is meant to be relatively easy to get through. If not, we are going to guide you through that process. You are not required to, bring an attorney to these things. It is meant to be open and easily accessible for everybody, particularly our residents.
So basically, in a nutshell, if it's zoned and it can be there, it's pretty much set in stone, right? The property can go there, the zoning, as long as they meet all the requirements, there's nothing really the village can do to
Yeah, if it's zoned for
stop it.
multifamily and somebody wants to build a multifamily, an apartment building there, yeah, generally speaking, again, the village could get in a lot of legal trouble and waste a lot of taxpayer money if we arbitrarily tried to play God and say, we like you, you can go there, we don't like you, you can't go there.
So just like down here, so if they want to build a mixed use, it has to be retail on the bottom,
Yep.
A residential on the top.
Yeah, so retail, professional office, a commercial use on that bottom floor, and then you can go pretty far up with residential
And
uses.
that's all downtown area.
All downtown area. It's got its zoning, it's got its boundaries. It's been like that for a long time. We didn't change the downtown boundaries. They were here when all of us got here. So that's well established. It is funny. You may look at something that looks like a house, but it's a commercial structure there. And so that's why we have these buildings that may look like houses that may have had like a law firm in them. And that was an attorney who was operating out of that, because an attorney's a commercial business operating in a commercial district.
So how can residents find out more about the Bensonville Economic Development?
Yeah, so again, the easiest way is just give us a call. That's 630-350-3413. You'll get the Community and Economic Development Department. A lot of educated staff here willing to assist you in any way possible. The village website, bensonville.il.us, lots of good information there. There's a Community and Economic Development page under the Government tab at the top. But again, feel free to just give us a ring, shoot us an email. Also want to stress how our Community Development Commission, all that information is on the website. The meetings are open to the public. Every meeting is posted. Public notices are sent out to affected property owners. This is a very open process, and we want everybody involved. We actually Zoom record and live all our Community Development Commission meetings. So if you ever want to check out a Community Development Commission meeting, it will be live on Zoom. You can find that link on our website. We try to be as open and transparent as possible with all our processes.
I'd almost turn that question around. Where can't you find economic development or planning questions? People tend to call you and just directly. You always give your number out there. I say sometimes to a fault, but you disagree with me on that. And those questions immediately get rerouted up to my office, up down to Curtis, and answers go out. We have our website. Where do you get the information? Where don't you? It's everywhere. It is our newsletters, our website, our Facebook page that are open to the public, not private or anything. Our Instagram, our Twitter, Vimeo, YouTube, Zoom. It's everywhere, and we keep finding new places to post, and we're going to keep trying to get more and more information out there. We really want our residents to be involved in this process.
Yeah, by them getting involved and getting it, I guess, basically from the horse's mouth, it quells a lot of suspicions and a lot of misinformation, I guess.
Right. Perfect example is whenever a zoning question comes for a certain property, a sign goes up in that lawn, gives the date of the meeting, when that CDC meeting is going to be, gives the location. We have residents snap those pictures and they call me and say, what's going on here? I love those type of questions. I love getting that information out there. I've emailed that person the whole zoning packet, everything's going to be considered, and people flip through it and find it interesting, or if they find objections to it, come to the meeting. Let's talk about it.
I mentioned it before. We are required, by law, to notify everyone within 250 feet of the property that is being affected. So we take that very seriously. We let everybody know. And then even beyond that, we're going to post it. It's going to be posted at Village Hall. We're going to post it online. So it's not just the property that are being affected, but neighbors beyond that. We want everybody to know what's going on.
Well, hopefully that answers a lot of questions out there. Hopefully people can find us more and find out where to get those questions answered. Thank you guys for clearing all that up. Thank you for joining me today. And thank you guys all out there for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for Spotlight on Bensonville.